Hello bookworms and welcome back to my channel. It's time for another monthly reading wrap-up, roundup. What I read in August. I've no idea how many books I've read this month. I haven't counted because, again, it's a mixture of physical and electronic, and it's a pretty equal split again this month. I don't have them physically to count, but I mean, I'm going to stop rambling now and get on with the video. First book that I read this month was actually an audiobook, and it's also a duology, and I'm going to talk about both books at the same time because it's a duology, and it is the Bridge Kingdom duology, so that's made up of the Bridge Kingdom and the Traitor Queen, and this is written by Danielle L. Jensen. Bridge Kingdom is kind of a fantasy. I don't know whether fantasy is the right word like to describe it, because as much as it's set in like a mythical kingdom, there's no like fantasy creatures or fantasy elements to it. Like, it's all very real. Real is not the right word because it's set in like a kingdom. But what I'm saying is, like, there's no dragons or magic or anything. Like, it's all real life animals and real life style events. So like Game of Thrones, but without the spice. Not spice is the wrong word, because spice means sex now, doesn't it? Without the like mythical elements. It's pitched as like a fantasy romance, but I don't really know if it is a fantasy. It's more of like a medieval kind of fantasy. I don't know. For me, fantasy is mythical, but hey ho. But it is about a bunch of sisters that are raised to basically be an assassin for a king of another kingdom. So their father is going to marry one of them off to this king with the intent of the wife being a spy and then an assassin. And Lara is the girl that goes to marry the king, King Aaron. It's kind of like an enemies to lovers. Well, it's a one-sided enemies to lovers because Aaron doesn't know that Lara is the enemy, but Lara does know that she's the enemy. The thing that I like really enjoyed about this book is the world building and the politics, because there is a hell of a lot of who is fighting who and who doesn't like who and who's the king of what kingdom, and I love that. So like, I really enjoyed that element of the story. I don't particularly get on with the genre of new adult romance with fantasy settings. They're just not really my thing. I like my fantasy books to be fantasy, and I'm also just not really a fan of very explicit sex scenes. It's just like a personal thing. I'm more of a fan of a fade to black, and I know people hate that. But I was pleasantly surprised by the Bridge Kingdom and its characters, especially Lara, because a lot of the time the female characters in these new adult books kind of get the blunt end of the stick when it comes to how they're treated. I think I preferred the second one to the first one just because there's like more action in the second one. You get to see more characters in the second one, and it was a really great ending. There was nothing worse than investing in a duology and then the ending being a bit but no, the ending was great. But yeah, the reason that I listened to this was because Audible have got a new feature now called Audible Plus, where if you are signed up for Audible, there's like sort of like a Netflix element to Audible now, where they have audiobooks that are just available. You don't need to spend your credit on them. Those two books were available, and they come up a lot on Book Talk, and I know a couple of people personally that really enjoyed them. So I thought I'd give it a go. Although this book is compared a lot to From Blood and Ash. It is nothing like From Blood and Ash, and if you are like me and didn't really like From Blood and Ash, don't let that comparison put you off, because, as I say, it's nothing like From Blood and Ash. And Aaron's not toxic, which is, you know, always great. Another thing, because I listened to the audiobook, I thought their names were Aaron and Laura. The audiobook is narrated by two actors, but they're both American, because it's as far as I'm aware, an American novel. But then when I saw the names written down, I was like, that is Aaron and Lara, but because of their accents, it sounded like they were saying Aaron and Laura. Okay, I'm just editing it now, and I've realised that I said it wrong. So it sounds like they're saying Orin, not Aaron I don't know where I got Aaron from. Yeah, it sounds like they're saying Orin, and his name's Aaron. But the point still stands. And for fans of spice, this has it in it, but it's not too much. So if you're like me and not really a fan of it, it doesn't last very long. I gave the duology 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Winter Garden by Alexandra Bell, and this is actually an ARC copy that was sent to me by the publishers. It's a paperback, and the actual book when it comes out will be hardback. Also, floppy. Yes, this was sent to me. I'm actually part of the blog tour for this book, and the post is already up, so if you want to check that out, the link to my Bookstagram is in the description. I think this is this author's debut adult fiction. The other books that this author has done is under the name Alex Bell, and obviously this is under Alexandra Bell, and this is the only book under that name, so I think that this is their adult debut. And it is about a little girl called Beatrice. She's 8 years old. She loses her mum. Her mum dies. She doesn't just lose her in a supermarket. And on the evening that her mother passes, the Winter Garden turns up. And for 7 days, Beatrice gets to enjoy the magic that is the Winter Garden. But then after 7 days are up, the garden disappears. No one believes her that it existed. And then we fast forward 18 years. She's about to get married to a man that she doesn't love, because this is set in... Who came before Victoria? It's set when Victoria is a princess and then when she becomes queen. So like early Victorian, late, whatever period was before Victorian. I don't know my history. So yeah, it's sort of the society deems that women should marry. She doesn't want to marry this man. This man is a duke. When she leaves him at the altar, she decides that she's going to take control of her life and she's going to keep looking for the garden. And then also in the story, so this book is not just about Beatrice, we also get, oh my god, is her name Rosa? Yes. We also get Rosa's story, and Rosa she is American and she's moved to England on the lookout for a man with a title so that she can marry and gain a title. She's a little bit younger than Beatrice, but they are like friends. Basically, this book is the story of these two women, how their lives connect with each other, and basically it's a story of regret. And I loved this book. It is very different from what I expected, and I think now I know to never go into a book with certain expectations, because it will just not be what you expect. For the first 100 pages or so, I think I was a little bit disappointed that it wasn't what I expected. Obviously that was like more of a personal thing. It was because I'd given myself expectations of it. But once I was like, no, like stop thinking that way, I really, really, really enjoyed this. It's a very difficult read at times because it explores themes of basically women's lives in this time and how they didn't have many rights, if any. Their lives were basically controlled by their father and then subsequently their husband. How women were looked down upon if they weren't married. The word spinster is used. Fun fact, you are a spinster at the age of 23, so hello to all my fellow spinsters. There's talk of what mental health practices sort of look like at the time, how doctors viewed mental health, how doctors viewed women's issues on women's health, because obviously all doctors were men. So a lot of that is explored and it is very tough to read. If you do have any triggers, feel free to message me, like to ask me whether the book contains any of your triggers. Obviously because this is quite a new book, not enough people have read it yet for there to be a list of trigger warnings, so if you do want that, feel free to message me. It's feminist, it's magical, it explores regret beautifully. That is a massive theme throughout this book. The main well, they sort of share the title of main character, but Beatrice, although the terms asexual and aromantic aren't used, as far as I'm aware they didn't have terms like that back then, so that's not like specifically mentioned, but being ace myself, I definitely picked up aro ace vibes from Beatrice. So I don't know if she's canonically aro ace, but for me she felt that way and that made me happy. But I was actually so inspired by this book and this gorgeous cover that I actually painted a picture. It's not framed yet. Yeah, I painted this, which is of Beatrice as a child in the Winter Garden. And I'm very proud of it. I haven't painted in probably 2 years. I needed to get back into it because I love painting, and that was acrylic on paper. For any artists that are interested in knowing what mediums I used, I highly recommend you picking this up when it comes out, and part of me is very tempted to get the beautiful Waterstones edition, which looks like this. I really want it. I can't remember exactly when it comes out, but I've got a feeling it's like the first week of September, so it's probably already out. And I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I read Grown Ups by, I think, Marianne Keyes. This is the issue when you read electronically and you don't have the physical book. This was surprisingly long. Because it was an ebook, you can't see how thick they are because it's on a flat surface. This book has 650 pages. It is a chunk and it took me quite a while to read it. But it is about an Irish family and their life. Basically, it's 3 brothers and their wives and then their children. It's basically set at family events throughout a couple of months. I think it's 6 months maybe, and it's like counting down to an event, so it's like 6 months before, 4 months before, that kind of format. So it's basically just about family life and how when hits the fan in families, it's where are the grown-ups? Because I sure as hell ain't one, kind of thing, because I definitely feel like that sometimes. Even though, yes, I am on paper a grown-up, but mom help kind of thing. This explores a lot of kind of dark subjects. There's discussions of death and grief. There's also, one of the characters has an eating disorder, so there's discussions on how that can affect a relationship. I mean, there is a lot of characters, and I think if you were reading it with a physical book, you wouldn't have the issue, but there's a family tree at the beginning of the book because there are that many characters that like the family tree is very much needed. So if you were listening via an audiobook, or as I was reading it via ebook, access to that family tree is much harder because you can't just like flick to the front. I enjoyed the build-up. I enjoyed learning about all these different characters and, you know, the psychology of these characters and, you know, what happened to make them act certain ways or how they interact with certain other characters and stuff. Like, I found that really interesting. If you're a fan of drama, I think you'll like it. But the ending, so how everything concluded, I wasn't particularly happy with. It felt a little bit like I have been reading for ages. I've read 600 pages for this. I want more, please. But I enjoyed it overall. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I then read Circus of Wonders by Elizabeth McNeil. This is probably one of the most beautiful books I own because, wait for it, I love books about circuses. My favourite book is The Night Circus, so need I say any more? This definitely seemed right up my street. It's also set in Victorian times. I don't know what it is about circuses set in Victorian England. I think it's because that was a time when people were obsessed with like the oddities, and like freak shows and sideshows were really popular because Queen Victoria loved that. So that was really a time when things like that were popular. But after reading The Winter Garden, I was really in the mood for more Victorian historical fiction. Winter Garden is obviously about pleasure gardens. This has pleasure gardens in it, it has circuses, and I've owned it for a while, so it was about time that I picked it up. This is a dual perspective book, so it's about Jasper, Toby and Nell. Jasper and Toby are brothers and they own the Circus of Wonders, Jasper Jupiter's Circus of Wonders. And Nell is a girl from a seaside town, and she is covered in birthmarks from like head to toe. It's specifically said that it's not vitiligo, it just says birthmarks covered from head to toe. Because of the time period that this book is set in, obviously she is seen as an other, as a freak. The only person that she feels close to is her brother, but her brother is getting married and she doesn't want to feel like a third wheel in the marriage. But Jasper Jupiter's circus comes to the village that she is living in, and that's when her life changes and she is taken away with the circus. She becomes an act and Jasper crafts her into Nellie Moon and basically makes her famous. I would describe this as a historical mystery because you're sort of learning how the two brothers came to own the circus and like what happened in their past, because both of them served in the Crimean War. So yeah, I would say that it's like a historical mystery. There are obviously circus elements in it, so if you are a fan of like freak shows and circuses and sort of like the origin of that kind of show, so there's a lot of talk of P.T. Barnum and all of his famous acts. It doesn't shy away from the fact that it was nasty. P.T. Barnum was a nasty man and the treatment of the performers was not nice. I liked that about this book because you can get a lot of stories about P.T. Barnum and about circuses from this era that are really romanticised, and that just was not the case. But yeah, if you are a fan of that era of circuses, you will probably appreciate all of the little Easter eggs. There's a love story in it for people that like love stories. I enjoyed it. Nothing spectacular, like I wasn't blown away, but I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read is a novella, and I don't read many novellas. It's Nick and Charlie by Alice Oseman, and if you don't know who Nick and Charlie are, they are characters in the Heartstopper graphic novels, which I absolutely love. Like, I adore those graphic novels. I actually have the colouring book, 1 second. Nick and Charlie, Heartstopper. That's Nick and Charlie. Coloured in by moi. They are characters in the Heartstopper graphic novels, but before they were characters in the Heartstopper graphic novels, they were characters in the novel Solitaire. And this is actually marketed as a solitaire novella. You might have seen my review of it. I read it in May, I think. No, July, June. I can't remember. June or July. It was when I was away on holiday, so June actually. Pretty sure June. So you might have seen in my wrap up that I did read it. I didn't really like Solitaire. I thought the mental health representation was not good, like not healthy representation. And I have a real love-hate relationship with Alice Oseman's work because I adore the Heartstopper volumes. I really enjoyed Radio Silence. I really enjoyed I Was Born for This. Solitaire, did not like. Loveless, just no. I either love it or I hate it, and yeah. Most of my issues with Alice Oseman's work come from representation. So the reason I didn't like Solitaire was because I thought the mental health representation was bad, and the reason I didn't like Loveless is because I thought the ace rep was bad, and that's coming from an ace person, but I also thought that the pan rep was a bit dodge. That's a bit of background on my opinion on Alice Oseman's work. This book obviously combines the characters that I love dearly from the Heartstopper volumes, but also kind of the writing style of Solitaire. I really didn't enjoy this as much as I thought I would. I thought this was going to be a guaranteed 5-star because I love Nick and Charlie. I don't know, I didn't like it. I obviously love the characters, and I prefer Tori in the graphic novels than I do in Solitaire. I find her a little bit irritating in Solitaire, whereas I really like her in the graphic novels. But that's another thing, they don't feel like the same characters. The characters from the graphic novels don't feel like the characters on the pages of Solitaire, and there's just some disconnect there that, I don't know, I struggle with a little bit. This was a weird reading experience because I love the characters, but this just felt weird, so I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read was one of my favourite books of this month, but also one of my favourite books I've read this year. It's Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo a couple of months ago, and just that book is incredible. And I kind of didn't think that I was going to enjoy Daisy Jones and the Six. I don't really know why, because obviously I loved The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I don't know whether that was part of the reason why I thought I wasn't going to enjoy it, because like it wasn't going to live up to expectations. Just something about it, like I was like, I'm not going to love this book. boy was I wrong, because this book is freaking incredible. For one thing, look how gorgeous this hardback is. I got this hardback from a charity shop and it was 50p, half of a British pound. And look at that. Just look at it. One thing I will say is the cover and the title make it seem like this book is about Daisy Jones. It's not. It's about the band, Daisy Jones and the Six. I don't know whether that's on purpose. Like, I don't know whether they've purposefully made the marketing so it looks like it's just about her, because on all of the covers it's just a picture of her rather than a picture of like a band. This is written like the transcript of a interview, so it's all of the different members of the band, the people that were around, so like friends of the band, friends of like individual members and producers and stuff. And it's just the story of how Daisy Jones and the Six came to be a band and how they broke up. But the one thing that I adore about this book is because it is the same story from multiple different perspectives, everyone is going to come away from this book believing certain events over other people. Because it's from different perspectives, you get that thing of like, you don't know which one is the actual truth, because everyone is going to believe their own story. So you're going to come away from this believing certain stories and like loving and hating different characters because of the fact that it is like dual perspective, and you're going to believe different people. And I feel like that makes reading this a really personal experience, and I just love that. And it's what makes Taylor Jenkins Reid just such an incredibly talented writer. Also, I mean, I personally am a big fan of 70s music. I love music documentaries and like biopics about musicians, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it, like the music part of it. And I gave this 5 out of 5 stars if it wasn't already obvious, and I will now read anything that Taylor Jenkins Reid publishes because so good. I also now want to read Malibu Rising because apparently there are some cameos. Last month I listened to Alice in Wonderland because I wanted to listen to a book that I haven't revisited since I was little, and I wanted to do that again because it was a really enjoyable experience. So I listened to The 101 Dalmatians by, I want to say, Jodie Smith. I love this book. It's brilliant. It's just, I mean, it's a little bit dated in the sense of like men and women's roles, because I think it was written in the 50s. I love it. Really enjoyed listening to this. It was, again, a nice nostalgic experience. Again, I highly recommend that you revisit books that you haven't read since you were a child. It's a very nice experience. And also, if you haven't read The 101 Dalmatians, do it. It's a lovely little children's book. So I really, very rarely give books less than 2 stars. Like if I dislike a book, I will give it 2 stars. But this next book, my first lower than a 2-star review. Brace yourself. It's On the Other Side by Carrie Hope Fletcher. Now, before we start, I just want to say that under this dust jacket is gorgeous. And it's smooth as well. I love it. And that is the only thing I love about this book. The story of On the Other Side. Evie Snow dies, surrounded by her family. She enters the afterlife, tries to open the door into her apartment to her own personal heaven, and it won't open. She's got the key, but it won't open. She's then met by her own personal angel, I guess, and it takes the form of someone that she knew in her life, and she's told that her soul is too heavy to get through the door to the afterlife, and she has to find a way to make her soul lighter so that she can pass through. That sounds great. Like, that premise sounds like something that I would like to read. I don't know where to start when it comes to this book. It's advertised as women's fiction. It reads more like middle grade. It's a very patronising writing style. Like, there are, I guess, more mature things. Like, there is a sex scene, but it's not really a sex scene because it is like, it's alluded to. It's kind of like the author doesn't want to talk about sex and alcohol and stuff. It's like, oh no, can't talk about that. 1950s housewife kind of feel, like, oh, we can't talk about that. Talk about the 1950s. This has no time period. It's not when is this set? There's no time period, which makes it utterly confusing. Another thing about it feeling like a middle grade book, or feeling like a children's book, is that all of the characters have really ridiculous names. Evie Snow, okay, fair enough. But then her mom is called Eleanor Snow, and her dad is called Edward Snow, and her brother is called Eddie Snow. They're all E's. And then the other family are Summers. And then there is a character called Autumn Summer. This was also, I hate to say it, but really, it felt like a vanity project. I used to watch the author's videos when, like, around the time that this book actually came out, and there's loads of like references to that, and it's weird. The main character, Evie, looks like the author. Like, the description is the author. There's also lots of people's attractiveness is brought up a hell of a lot, which made me really uncomfortable. The love interest, Vincent, is creepy. I just didn't like it. I really didn't like it. It was badly written, badly executed. The reason I think I'm going to give it such a low rating is, why does this book exist when there are so many talented authors that cannot get in the room? And in my personal opinion, I feel like the only reason that this got published is because already has a following. And I read the reviews to her other books just to see, and apparently it don't get any better. I gave it 1.5 out of 5 stars, which is the lowest rating that I have given a book this year so far. So I don't recommend this. We got some more audiobooks from a series. I read the first and second book in the Bone Witch series by Rin Chapeko, and that is The Bone Witch and The Heart Forger. Both of these were audiobooks. Both of this was through the Audible Plus new thing, which I am really enjoying. I am loving this series. It's a trilogy, and I haven't read the last book yet, but you'll probably see that in my September wrap-up video. It is about a girl, Tia, who accidentally raises her brother from the dead, and it turns out that she is a bone witch. She is one of the rarest and most powerful of the Archers, which is what witches are called in this world. Even though it's very rare and very powerful, it's also feared because bone witches deal in necromancy, which, for those of you that don't know, that is magic through bones. But the series is written in like a dual perspective, so you have Tia's perspective, and that's from like a flashback point of view, and Tia is narrating. And you have the story in the present, and it's a character called the Bard, or just Bard, who is narrating it. And that's where you see Tia, how she is in the present, which is powerful but outcasted. When you're reading the bits in the flashback, you're kind of seeing how, like, what happened that meant that Tia becomes an outcast. This series is giving me real Grishaverse vibes, because the Archers deal with like elemental powers, so like fire, water, wind, all that kind of stuff. Also in the sense of like obviously found family. So a lot of this series reminds me of the Grishaverse, so if you are looking for something after reading the Grishaverse where you want more, definitely I recommend The Bone Witch. I mean, obviously I haven't read the final one yet, but I am loving the series so far. And I love Tia. I think she's a brilliant protagonist, and I'm loving seeing her journey and sort of finding out more about what has happened that means that she is the Tia that we see in the present through Bard's eyes. I love that trope of girl discovers that she has very rare and powerful ability that she didn't know she had. And so far it's like a pretty like 4.5 star series, but I will get back to you once I've finished the last one in the series, which is, what's that called? The Shadow Glass? And I'll let you know my final thoughts. And the final book that I read in the month of August is Torn by Jasmine Watson. Now, this book won't be out by the time... I just ran up the stairs. This book won't be out by the time that this video comes out. It comes out on the 21st of September, I believe. And this was sent to me by the author herself. Jazz is actually an indie author, and this is her debut novel. And she sent this to me because she knows that I'm a massive fan of the Grishaverse, as you can see from behind me. And this is pitched for fans of Shadow and Bone and stardust. And again, this is the trope of girl discovers she has very rare and powerful ability that she didn't know she had. So this book is about the in-between, which is a land very much like, think Stardust, think Ella Enchanted. I'd very much got Ella Enchanted Kingdom vibes from the in-between. The land of the in-between is currently going through a war. Those with powers have to go through a census and they're constantly tracked. They can't live freely and they can't do certain things. They can't like have their own money and stuff. There's a ancient villain that is trying to wipe out Potens, which are the people with magical abilities. There's unrest in the royal family. It's basically everything's going wrong. But there is one person that can help, and that is Ivy Anderson. But Ivy Anderson lives in the above, and she thinks that the in-between is a fairy tale. But then Jacob Grimm turns up on our doorstep, and yeah, that's how the story begins. If you are a fan of the girl discovers power trope, found family trope, I hate everyone but you trope, I think this is a book that BookTok is going to love. So if you are on BookTok and you know what kind of books that people on BookTok enjoy, I definitely think that this is going to be a popular one. This is a YA book and it's going to be part of I want to say trilogy. This is book one in the verse of Grimm, Grimm being Jacob Grimm. I loved Jacob Grimm. My kind of character. Morally grey. The thing I enjoyed most about this book is the world that it's set in. I really enjoyed the in-between, and as I say, it very much gave me Stardust and Ella Enchanted vibes. And so many twists and turns, ends on a cliffhanger. I need the next one. But I gave this book 4 stars. So those were all of the books that I read in the month of August. Let me know if you've read any of them and what you thought. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to click the thumbs up button because it makes me happy. And if you're new here, make sure to click the subscribe button. And also, if you click that little bell, it means you get a notification whenever I upload a video, and it means you'll never miss one. So highly recommend that you do that. But thanks for watching, guys, and happy reading.